The whistle over Coal Run. Jordan Ellis hadn't seen Coal Run, Pennsylvania in 13 years, not since the night the mill whistle bounced across the valley like an argument you couldn't win. The paper mill had closed in 2009. Everyone said so. There was a ceremony with a podium no one could afford, a photograph in the county paper of the owner shaking hands with the union president, while both men looked past each other. The gates were chained. The whistle went silent. That last part was true for a while. Jordan came back because the state gave a grant with a name long enough to hide a promise inside, an environmental remediation fellowship. Translation: come home, test the river, apologize to the fish, and write reports that the commissioners would skim the way men skim stones, quick, careless, and certain they'd done something. Coal Run looked the same from a distance. Row houses in tired colors, a church with a steeple leaning like an old man pretending he wasn't tired, a little league field where outfielders grew up watching the trains and learned patience. Up close, it had learned new tricks: murals over brick scars, a coffee shop in the pawnshop's bones, the old mill road fenced off with a sign that said, "No trespassing," in letters so large they sounded nervous. The apartment Jordan rented above the barbershop had a front window that faced the valley. At dusk, the hill shadows folded like paper. Around 7:11 p.m., as the first stars decided whether to audition, something happened that Jordan had forgotten how to brace for. A long, low tone, the particular metallic howl of a whistle built to move a town. It wasn't loud, not anymore. It was as if someone had put a memory through a cheap speaker. It lasted 9 seconds, then it stopped. Dogs barked. Somewhere a porch light flicked on. Jordan stood at the window and said out loud, "No." At the diner the next morning, Jordan asked the waitress Ruth Harrow, who'd sat behind them in algebra and never left, if the siren still went off for volunteer fire calls. "Not since they put the new system in," Ruth said, pouring coffee with the resigned elegance of someone who knew gravity on a first-name basis. "What you heard is the mill. It comes back some nights when the river's low and the air's mean." "The mill is closed." "Sure," Ruth said, as if sure were a jacket you could borrow and return without anyone noticing. "But it remembers." "What does it remember?" "Shift change," Ruth said. "Head counts." She lowered her voice. "Men who didn't make the gate." On the walk to the resource center, the grant had bought a cubicle in a building that used to be a Catholic school. Jordan caught Walter Dunn unlocking the front door. He wore a county badge and a tie that looked like it had been promised the job of being cheerful. "You're the river person," he said, jangling a key ring that could anchor a small boat. "Welcome home, don't stir up ghosts. Commissioners hate paperwork." "I'm here for water samples," Jordan said, "and soil cores." "Good," Walter said. "Dirt that behaves." Third. Coal Run measured time by whistles and funerals. The mill had trained nerves to answer both. By Jordan's second week, the rhythm returned. 6 a.m., sorrow pealing from the church bells nobody tuned, noon trains arguing with the river, dusk doing its old trick. The whistle's long note slicked the town and left a film that didn't wash off. Jordan learned the story everyone knew but told like it was private. In 1977, after a floor collapse no one admitted, the company changed the head count rules. You didn't clock out, you were counted out. The foreman stood at the gate with a clipboard like a priest, reading names. He didn't read them all. Sometimes he dropped his eyes on purpose. "Shift math," said Walter when Jordan asked. "Numbers that make payroll look better." "And the missing?" "Out of scope," he said gently, the way people say you're sweet when they mean you're naive. The river told its own version. Jordan took samples where the creek fed into the Susquehanna, where cattails kept their gossip. The pH was fine. The metals were almost fine. The fish were not fine. The fish had a taste like pennies, old weather, and apology. On a Wednesday with sky the color of a bruise nearly healed, a teenager named May showed up at Jordan's folding table in the resource center with a shoebox. My granddad kept these, she said. Inside were time cards stamped in purple ink. Names Jordan recognized: Green, Whitaker, Pike, and others layered under spills and thumb smears. On the margin of one card, in pencil, a note: Don't stand by the west catwalk after rain. On another, if the whistle changes pitch, count again. Why bring them to me? Jordan asked. May looked past the folding table to the window and the hill beyond, like she was gauging a distance she couldn't measure. Because you're the one everyone says shouldn't be told, she said, and I'm tired of only telling people who already know. IV. At 7:11, the whistle sounded twice, the second note higher, like a question climbing stairs. Jordan was on the apartment floor with a map spread out, marking soil pulls with a red pen. The second note made their teeth ache. The lights in the barbershop below blinked once, twice, in the arrhythmic way of a building remembering it had a heart. Jordan went downstairs. The street was noise and quiet braided together. People held still without admitting they were holding still. An old man in a Vietnam cap stood with his hand cupped behind his ear the way you hold a shell. Kids joked too loud. A dog refused to be brave and went under a porch. The whistle stopped. The silence that followed had weight. Jordan crossed the bridge toward the mill road. The chain-link fence ended before the tree line. The no trespassing sign had been bent by a decision someone didn't want to own. The weeds along the fence held the shape of people who had stood here often. The grass pressed as if listening. A padlock hung off the gate like a bruise pretending not to be a bruise. Jordan climbed. Inside the fence, the air changed temperature, the way it does in churches and meat lockers. The mill yard was a cathedral of metal-bleached pipes, a tangle of trusses, windows like 100 tired eyes. Jordan followed the main track toward the boiler house, stepping around puddles that reflected the sky as if auditioning for a better job. The closer to the center, the colder the air. The whistle tower rose above everything, a metal spine with a throat. Up close, it was obvious. There was no steam, no line pressure. The whistle couldn't sound. It sounded. 9 seconds. Then 9 again, a half-step sharper, as if a hand had moved on a piano you couldn't see. Jordan felt it in molars and along the bones that remember childhood. The whistle ended with a breath, not a click, the way a person lets go of a note when they're too tired to hold anger and mercy at the same time. Jordan turned toward the office building rows of glass, a lobby with a tiled floor that made boots ring. The door was unlocked. People say buildings go empty. They don't. They fill with what we don't say. V. The office smelled like paper that shouldn't still be here. A corkboard held notices for a Christmas party in 2008. Bring a dish, no shellfish. A memo about personal phone calls, don't. A letter from corporate about safety, capital letters, brave lies. On a metal desk, a punch clock sat like a square, patient head. The cards in the slot rack were turned backward as if a hand had been forced to be shy. Jordan took out a phone to take photos. The screen went dim. The new battery lied about being tired. In the dim glass, Jordan saw a reflection and raised the phone as if it were a mirror that might volunteer context. Someone stood at the end of the hallway. Not tall. Lean where worry eats muscle. A man in a work jacket with his name stitched above the pocket, Sam. The letters were a little crooked, like a mother's careful work. Sam? Jordan said, because sometimes the obvious is an offering. He shook his head. Samuel when the foreman's mad. Sammy when my sisters got me on a chore. Mostly, hey you. His voice sounded like gravel taught to be kind. You aren't supposed to be here. I grew up here. That's not what I mean, he said. He looked at the punch clock, like a man looks at a door. You got a card? No. You got a name? Jordan. He nodded once. Count with me, he said, and pulled a stack of time cards from the rack. He didn't look at the names. He didn't have to. He ran his thumb along the edges like a prayer bead. 1, 2, 3. He paused. See? There's the hole. He held up a card without a name. The inked time was there, 6:58 in, 3:12 out. But the place where a name belongs was blank, the way a face sometimes is in dreams when you know who it is without seeing them. We called it the hole because if you talk about a person like the number, you start to forget why you're counting. Jordan looked at the blank space and felt something tilt. How many? Samuel put the card down with such care the air noticed. Enough to make a town teach itself to look the other way. He tipped his head, as if hearing a far-off engine. You should go. Because of the whistle? Because it's almost head count, he said, and before Jordan could ask who would count what was no longer there, the hallway's lights stuttered to life on their own. Flicker, flicker, hum. Somewhere, a bell that wasn't a bell chimed twice. The punch clock coughed out a card that had not been there. Jordan picked it up. It was their father's name. The times didn't match the story they had grown up telling themselves. 6 Jordan left with the card in a pocket, and the particular nausea of finding a piece of truth sharp enough to cut. On Main Street, cars resumed pretending they were part of a place that had never ended. The people in the diner held their coffee differently, 2 hands around the warmth like it owed them. Ruth slid a plate onto Jordan's table without asking, a grilled cheese gentrified by the hope of tomatoes in January. You look like you saw your own echo, she said. Jordan put the card between the ketchup bottle and the salt. Ruth didn't touch it. My dad used to say the clock was wrong the day the flood took the lower floor, Jordan said. Said my granddad stayed to help with sandbags till after midnight. Your granddad died in the mill, Ruth said gently. Your dad never let the sentence finish. Why does the whistle sound? Because nobody gave it permission to be quiet, Ruth said. Some things you bless, some things you bury, this one we neither. Walter came in like weather, laughing too big at a joke he hadn't told yet. He saw the time card and saw, Jordan could tell, everything else. We don't bring the mill into the diner, he said, as if manners could push history out the door. Put that away. Jordan didn't. The whistle changed pitch, Jordan said. 2 notes. Why? Walter's face did something like mercy, trying not to be mistaken for weakness. Head count, he said finally. First note for in, second for out. Only the second didn't always match the first. And if you start to ask why, the answer has a cost. Who pays it? The ones who ask, he said, and the ones who didn't get counted. 7. The first night Jordan stayed past midnight, the mill wasn't the destination. It was the only place that answered. The whistle did not sound. The river did. Jordan followed the sound to the back of the boiler house where the concrete had cracked, and the soil poured itself into the gap like a promise to return. There, half buried, was a box of time cards wrapped in oilcloth. Jordan took it home and laid the cards out on the apartment floor the way you lay out photos after a funeral, trying to make the story true by making it neat. Each card had a note in pencil. Tiny instructions. Don't take the west stairs after rain. Don't let the foreman see you go to the nurse more than twice. Keep your mouth shut on Tuesdays. Bring 2 sandwiches if the man on the second catwalk is working. He forgets to eat. On the last card, the pencil was soft from sweat. If they change the gate, count twice. Jordan slept on the couch and dreamed a whistle in reverse. A breath in, a note swallowed, a silence that hurt. In the morning, May knocked on the door holding a plastic bag with 2 jars of water. From the outflow near the old bleaching room, she said. We keep getting headaches in our house when the wind's wrong, Jordan tested. The counts were within tolerances. The nausea wasn't. It's not just chemicals, Jordan said at the kitchen sink. It's a story stuck in the air. Stories make people sick? When they're told wrong, Jordan said. Or never finished. May went quiet. My uncle works nights for the county, she said. He says your grant is temporary. He says people who make lists are bad for towns. People who make lists are good for graves, Jordan said, and headstones. 8. They tried to stop Jordan the usual ways. A polite letter about liability, a frown about trespassing, a call from a county commissioner who used words like stakeholder until they sounded like furniture. Walter took Jordan aside and said, with more kindness than this sort of conversation usually gets, I probably owe you thanks, but the people who sign my checks would like me to owe you silence. You're the one who signed the memo in 1977, Jordan said. Pastoral adjudication for a headcount failure. You were 24. Walter flinched like a man hit with a year he hadn't realized was still loaded. The men came to my office with their hats in their hands, he said. They asked me to write what the pastor and the owner said, not what I knew. I did it so they could keep working. Then I kept doing it because I'd already done it. He put the heel of his hand against his eye, just once, the way old men do when they don't want to cry where someone can see. Do what you're going to do, he said, but mind the cost. Nye. The choice came like a whistle at dusk. Not an epiphany, a schedule. Jordan took the cards to the church basement on potluck night when the potatoes smell like faith. Set them on a long folding table. Said to the room and to the cards, these are names we counted wrong. Ruth stood beside them and did not speak. May handed out sticky notes and pens. People came. You don't think they will, and then they do. They touch the cards like you touch a relic, part superstition, part apology. A man in a Union jacket wrote his father's name. A woman wrote a name she'd been told not to say since she was 12. Someone wrote, in shaky script, just the word, me. The pastor did not come. The commissioner sent an email. The whistle sounded and the room kept counting. Jordan scanned every card and put them in a database that would make an intern proud and a county official itch. They emailed the scans to anyone who wanted them and a few who didn't. They sent a list to the paper in Harrisburg and to a lawyer in Carlisle and to a woman in Pittsburgh who introduced herself on the phone as the aunt who knows people. They made 3 paper copies and put them in 3 places. The resource center under the switchboard stairs, the church sacristy behind the votive candles, and Ruth's freezer under 4 pot pies and a bag of peas that could break a foot if dropped. X. On the night the whistle didn't sound, the town heard it anyway. That's how memory works when you stop hiding it. It shows up even when not invited. People went out on their porches to check the temperature of the dark. The barber turned off his TV. The dogs listened like they were reading lips. Jordan went to the mill because by then ritual had replaced doubt. Samuel met them at the gate. You shouldn't come alone, he said. I'm not, Jordan said, and he smiled a little because they were learning. The chain-link fence had been cut, the neat kind of cut that comes with bolt cutters, not boys, with the flap wired back open with good intentions. People stood in the weeds. Not many. Enough. May, Ruth, the man with the Vietnam cap. The woman who wrote me. Walter, holding his hat like it might testify. Samuel led them to the punch clock. Count, he said, and they did. They counted out loud. They put their fingers on the cards and matched the in to the out, as if balancing a checkbook you'd inherited and never reconciled. When they finished, the number was wrong. It will be wrong a long time. But now they knew by how much. The whistle did not sound. The boiler house sighed. The river made the sound of a field learning to be a river again. Samuel looked at Jordan and tilted his head like a question. Jordan nodded. He reached up and took the lever on the punch clock and pulled it slow, as if you could teach a machine to be gentle. The clock stamped 7:12. Someone laughed. Someone cried. May shook a ring of keys she didn't have. Ruth said, "We won't be quiet." Walter said nothing and everything. Ix and Jordan left Coal Run 3 months later when the grant ran out, because money has its own whistle, and it calls us back to places with reliable heat. They rented a small apartment in Lock Haven and a co-working desk with plants that looked smug in their terracotta. On the first night in the new place at 7-Eleven, they heard something thin and metallic move through the window screen. Not the mill, the mind. They stood at the sink and listened. The sound didn't come again. At 7:12, their phone buzzed. A text from May. They put the names in the paper. A photo followed newsprint, a list, a town refusing gently and finely to remain miscounted. Another photo, the old whistle tower with a banner someone had climbed to hang. The banner read, "We count us." Jordan printed the picture and taped it above the desk. Sometimes work is the light. Mostly, Jordan had learned, work is the line, the connection that keeps current moving when the men with keys get tired or decide tired is a value. They slept with the window cracked and dreamed of a punch clock that stamped mercy across time cards until the ink ran out. On Sunday, Jordan drove back to Coal Run and parked by the diner. The coffee tasted like memory done right. Ruth hugged without commentary. Walter brought a cardboard box to the table and set it down as if it might not be forgiven for existing. Inside, under a folded county flag that had no business being at a table with pie, was the punch clock. A cord snaked out the back, cut clean. "It belongs to you," Walter said. "Or to the church, or to the river, or to whoever doesn't say hush first. I can't keep it in my office anymore." Jordan touched the metal face, the square patient head. "We'll put it somewhere people can see it," they said. "Somewhere it can't be told to be quiet." Ruth slid a slice of shoe-fly pie onto a plate and handed Jordan a fork. "Eat," she said, counting Burns' sugar. They ate. When they were done, the valley folded itself into dusk again, a paper trick that never got old. At 7-Eleven, the air held a question and let it go. The whistle didn't sound. The town listened anyway. Then the lights in the barber shop blinked once, twice, like eyes adjusting to a different story.